Hey there, YouTube. My name is Becky. This is Bria Makes Art. If you are a returning viewer, you'll notice that my background looks a little bit different. I'm actually in my workshop. I've been doing some work out here to make things look a little bit nicer. I've got a nice wall over here of some artwork. Some of it's mine, some of it's stuff that I have purchased or received from other artists. And then back here is a lot of my art supplies. One of these days, maybe I'll give you an art tour if people are interested. But today we're going to be doing some work with some Sculpey putty or polymer clay, and I'm going to make a cute little fairy door. I already have it done, so I can give you a sneak peek here. This is what it looks like. And we'll switch over to a disembodied hands view, and I'll talk more about how I came up with the idea, how I'm doing it, that sort of thing. Maybe give some tips and tricks, what little I know, because I'm not really super familiar with it, but I just wanted to use some of this and start using up some of my art supplies. So I'll see you in a minute in just my hands. Here we are in disembodied hands view. I've got this sped up quite a bit because it would be awfully boring to watch me do this in real time. As you can see, I'm just chopping up some clay so that I've got even measurements so that I can reproduce colors. I wanted to start off by talking a little bit about why I decided to do this project and what led me to this idea. I was thinking about what I could do with some pieces of wood that I have in the garage that I wanted to paint on. And then I had some ideas about what I might paint on those. And that led me to do some searches online for ideas of what that might look like, which led me to a cute little sculpture that was made out of Sculpey putty, which led me to just the idea of a fairy door. And then I wanted to do a Hobbit hole fairy door because I hadn't really seen any like that, and I thought it would be super cute. So once I had the idea, I went looking online for different fairy door designs, that sort of thing. In a moment, I'll pull out my sketchbook and show you some of the sketches that I made. And I ended up going with the Hobbit door one that you saw at the very beginning because I really liked that idea. The one that I actually make is different than what it looked like in my sketchbook, but I'm really happy about that because what was in my sketchbook were designs that I saw directly online. I didn't want to copy exactly what I saw. I'm not too familiar with Sculpey putty or polymer clay. I've only made like one or two things from it in the past, so I did a little bit of research before I started on how I could actually make this thing. Sculpey has a tutorial on their website on how to make a fairy door. It's not the design that I followed, but I did follow their ideas of how to actually make the door and how to measure things out, that sort of thing. You can see here I'm mixing up a lighter brown, and in a moment you'll see that it actually ends up turning green with the dark brown and the yellow. Yep, there it is. And I thought that was kind of neat, so I pointed it out in the video. Obviously I've got this sped up quite a bit so you can't really hear what I'm saying. But yeah, I wanted a lighter brown to mix with the darker brown to get some variation in the wood so you could see some of the grain in the wood. You'll notice that I've got a bunch of tools for someone who doesn't really work with polymer clay a lot. These are just random things that I've accumulated over the years. I bought one of Jazz's art boxes a few years ago. It was the one that had 3 different boxes together, and it had Sculpey putty and a lot of these tools, so that's where a lot of this came from. Some of the Sculpey putty is stuff that was my son's from many, many years ago, and it's still good. I was really surprised. So in case you didn't know, Sculpey will last quite a while. Just if you keep it in a Ziploc bag, it's not a big deal. I did notice that the stuff that was brand new that hadn't been opened yet at all was a little bit more pliable, but it just took a little bit more working with my hands to get it to work. So it wasn't really that big of a deal. If you look at the video right now, I'm basically making a big hamburger. I'm smushing together the different colors of brown. I'm going to just pile those up, and then in a minute I'm going to roll those out. And I'm looking up instructions on what I need to do. Yep, there we go. And I roll it out, and I'm going to break it in half and then twirl it together to get a nice marbled effect. And this was really cool for the end effect of the wood. I get some nice variations in color in the wood, so it looks like it's actually grains in the woods. That was really fun and really cool to see. Right now it kind of looks like a big pile of poop, but it looks pretty cool once it gets all done. So here we go. I'm going to cut it in half, and I realize, oh no, that's not very much. That's not half. So I chop it again, and then I'm going to roll that out, and then you should be able to see the graining in the wood in a minute. At this point, I was pretty happy with how I could see some of the lighter colors in there. I was looking to see how thick it was there. And so I chop it in half and smush it together. And this is so that I can get my circle about the right size. As you saw at the beginning, I'm making a Hobbit door, so I wanted it to be circular. So I roll this all out and get it a little bit thinner and try and get it as even as I can. And then I go and try and find a circle template. There we go. There's my circle template, and I try and lay that on there. Oh yeah, I'm showing how this thing works. It's pretty cool. It's kind of got this like camera iris thing going on. But yeah, I'm just using that to try and figure out if my clay is the right size and roll it a little bit, and just take an X-Acto knife and cut some off. You'll note that I've got the clay on top of this mat. This is actually just a really cheap placemat that I got from a dollar store. We bought a bunch of these to use in the workshop here to do different projects because we didn't really care about them. They were cheap, and if we ruined them, it didn't matter. It's also really nice because that way the clay isn't sticking to my desk. And here I am marking out and just scoring where planks of wood would be. At first I was going to cut all the way through, and then realized if I did that, then I'd have to smush the wood back together, and I wasn't sure how well it would join. So I'm just scoring it there. I checked the back to make sure I didn't go through. And I wanted the little doorknob in the middle, so I'm making a little ball for that. And then I go to try and find some stuff to stick it together. This is for Cosclay, but it does say it's an oven adherent. I wasn't 100% sure it would work, but it did say it was for the oven, so I went ahead and gave it a try. I'm scoring the clay up here because if you're working with regular clay, you do that and kind of put some slip in there and it will make it stick. So I tried that, hoping that that would make it stick better, and so far it seems to work. Everything is still together, so I was happy. I set this aside so that I can pull up my sketchbook and show you some of the sketches that I made. You can see some of the different designs that I thought of or found online, and some of the things I liked in each one. I definitely liked the round door and maybe the stones around it. I wasn't sure if I was going to do regular stones or irregular stones. In a minute you'll see that I just did with more natural stones. And here we go. Actually, this is where I try to decide what to do with this leftover brown clay. I wanted to have some kind of overhang on there, so I'm just playing with it and tossing it on there to see what it looks like and see what I like. I decided I didn't like that, and so I decided to roll it out, and I thought, you know what, it'd be really cool just having a rounded piece of wood up there. So that's what I do, and I just kind of smoosh that on the top. I didn't use any of the stuff any of the adhesive on there, but right now I'm just making some marks on the wood to make it look a little bit more natural, cutting out some little bits so that it looks like there's knots in there, that sort of thing. I didn't want it to be super smooth so that it looked more like an actual piece of wood, so just kind of playing with that and patting it in place. I didn't really have this project planned out. You would think that I would have planned it out a lot more given the amount of experience that I have with polymer clay, but I was pretty sure I could make my vision work. I knew that I wanted some stones around the outside though, so I grabbed some black and some white to mix up. I liked that marbled look on that stone, and I was trying to see if I could make it work, but I ended up not really liking it with the whole thing, and it didn't really feel hobbity to me, so I mix it up a little bit more to get a more solid gray. I do leave a little bit of variation, but not a whole lot, and then I start placing stones around the outside. Just making rough circles and then shaping them a little bit so that they fit together nicely. I do end up having some spots where there are gaps in between the pieces of clay. That doesn't really bother me at all. I'm going to make a backer board for it so it'll keep it nice and stable, and so that I know that none of the pieces will break apart later. They'll just all be glued onto that backer board. So yeah, at this point I realized that I should probably get a piece of aluminum foil because I can't really put that placemat in the oven. So I wanted to put it on aluminum foil so that it was ready to just pop on a tray to go into the oven. So the next little bit is just me making more stones and putting them in place and trying to figure out what I want it to look like. I put like a little topper piece on there. As you can see, I've jumped ahead. I'm grabbing some tools. Again, you could see that that was from Jazza. These were some of the random rubber tools that he had in his kit. I just wanted to put some texture on the wood, on the stone. So I'm just poking at it and jabbing at it with different tools to try and shape and put more texture on the pieces of stone. Just randomly, I wanted to put some parts that look like cracks, some indentations, that sort of thing, and just playing with the tools so that I can get used to how they work. And I fiddled with this for a little while. At this point, I realized that I need a flat bottom on here, so I grab one of my tools and try to mark a spot on the aluminum foil to give me a nice straight line, and tried to dent it in, and now making some more stones to make it nice and flat. I quickly realized that I actually want a line marked on there, so I grabbed a Sharpie and just drew a line. That'll help me line up the stones on the bottom and give a nice flat edge on there so that the door can stand up nice and flat. So it turns out that that worked out pretty well. I was a little bit worried that it might burn off in the oven and make a lot of stink in my house, but it was not an issue at all. So if you do want to draw some shapes on your aluminum foil, feel free to do that with a Sharpie, and it works out pretty well, and you can follow that as a guideline. At this point, I'm pretty happy with it. It looks like I've put it on a sheet tray, and I decided I wanted to grab some chalk pastels and put some color on here. I wanted to get a little bit of darker tone in the cracks of the wood. So I had seen online that you can just use a chalk pastel and maybe scrape it off and paint it on the clay, and that color will stay. So I used that to put some shading on my stones. I was hoping that it would work in more of a dry brush fashion, but it really just applies wherever you touch your brush. So I had to be a little bit more careful and deliberate about how I applied the dark. Basically, I just grabbed some black there, and I'm putting shading around my stones to make them look more realistic. I really like how they turned out. It's pretty cool, and that color will just stay on there, and you don't have to worry about it. So this is kind of a cool little trick. And then I'll grab some other colors and put on there. I tried to put maybe some darker color in the slots of the wood, in between the wood, to give some shading in there. That ended up not working out quite the way I wanted it to. It was hard to get in those little cracks. So I ended up just abandoning that. I wasn't sure if this would work, but I grabbed a couple of different colors of browns and mixed them together to give me a different shade of brown. I wanted something a little bit darker, and it ended up working pretty well. Here I decided I wanted to mix it with black to make it even darker. And so you can mix the pastels like you would paint, and that worked out pretty well. I ended up going in between some of the slats, and then I ended up just stopping doing it because I got a little bit too much of that dark on the actual slat on the outside, and I didn't like that. I end up scrubbing a little bit of that off, but it is still stained. It just looks like the wood is stained though, so I'm not super mad at that. So just know that it will go wherever you place it, and if you are trying to get it into a really fine spot, you need to have a really fine tool to get it in there, and it will stain anything else. But this is a really cool trick. Oh, here we are. It's done. It's out of the oven. I'm pretty happy with it. But now I wanted to make it decorate it a little bit. So you can see I've got a whole bunch of miniature stuff for terrain and for putting on cool minis. And I grabbed some of the moss stuff and some super glue. And I fuss with this a little bit, trying to stick the pieces of moss on there where I want them to make it look very natural. I end up using the super glue for some of it, but that was really tedious and didn't work as well as I wanted it to. I ended up with more super glue on my fingers than anywhere else, and often the moss ended up sticking to the tweezers instead of to the clay. Later I'll grab some some tacky glue, and I use that instead, and that works beautifully. Here are those close-ups I promised. I'm going to zoom in a little bit and show you some of the detail on the stones. You can see the black on there really makes it look really realistic, and some of the markings that I put on the wood and on the stones really gives it a little bit of realism to it. So I'm super happy. Little tufts of grass on the top, super cute, and all of that texture that you can see in the wood from mixing the two different colors of brown together really gives it a sense of realism. And you can see there that black staining, but it looks just like there's water damage or something there. So I'm super happy with it. Hope you enjoyed this, and I will see you later. Bye.